Well, our correspondent Ed Augustin is in Havana for us. Hello to you, Ed. So we've seen these protests over and over again this year, but why is this protest any different?
Because Washington is making clear that the possibility of military intervention is even more likely. I'm not saying it is likely. It's the feeling here that it is that it's not likely, but more likely. And that was said explicitly or implied very clearly by the acting attorney general on Wednesday when Raul Castro was indicted. He said that he thinks that Raul Castro should either come to the United States to stand trial, or he would get there some other way. I paraphrase, but that's the meaning. Marco Rubio yesterday on the tarmac said that he wasn't going to talk about how Raul Castro may or may not get to the United States. And so this is very clearly reminiscent of what happened on January the 3rd when the United States abducted President Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. This was framed by the United States as merely an issue of internal justice and detaining and jailing a criminal, a narco-terrorist. No evidence, no serious evidence offered for that. Actually, the DOJ, a few days after the abduction, actually said that the Cartel de los Soles, the group that Maduro was supposedly the head of, didn't exist, that it was more of a culture. The Department of Justice said that a few days after. The same Department of Justice now has that now has an indictment against Raul Castro, and so the Cubans look around. They see that their main ally has been decapitated and that the oil is now going not to them but Washington. They see that Maduro was negotiating with the Trump administration, then it was a smokescreen. They see that negotiations between the Iranians and the Americans have been going on for a very long time now, and they see those clearly as a smokescreen. Partly because the negotiators were assassinated by a major US ally. And so this makes things very, very clear from their point of view. This is the Cuban government or regime, if you prefer, battening down the hatches, thinking, wow, if you're going to swoop and take somebody that we regard as a hero and that we know is the most powerful military figure on the country, it's going to be taken seriously.
So how is the Cuban government and the population preparing for a potential military intervention by the US?
Well, it's very difficult for them because there's hardly any petrol. And the Cuban revolution, so to speak, if that even exists these days, has never been weaker in its 67-year history. There was a National Defense Day a few months ago. You saw anti-aircraft missiles pulled along by oxen. I kid you not. At the same time, Cuba is not Venezuela. It's far more institutionalized. The army is professional. Even though the kit is obsolete, it's clear that the Cubans would fight. There's consensus amongst analysts that there is that US human intel is weak and that it would be difficult for them to go down the Delcy Rodriguez option, that is, identify somebody that would be pliant to them. As one diplomat told me the other day, they'd have to take 60 of them because the population know whether or not they like these octogenarians, they know who would step in if Raul Castro or President Diaz-Canel was assassinated or indeed abducted. And so it's a different ballgame for the United States if they were to try military intervention. Final anecdote for you. I was in Guantanamo province last week. Guantanamo is a very, very the poorest province of Cuba in eastern Cuba. And I was speaking to a young chap who was making charcoal. Increasingly, Cubans are making charcoal because there's no electricity because of the US petrol blockade. And I asked him two questions. I said, first of all, what's your dream? He said, to go to the United States. I then said, what would you do if the Americans invade? He said, I'm a trained sniper. And so I would act as a sniper, not necessarily because I want to, but because there would be huge political and social pressure on me to do that.
All right. Thank you very much. That's Ed Augustin reporting for us from Havana.